Hey everyone, it's Sammy from Push Square and I've got a big review for you today. So over the weekend I played through Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice, which is a game I've been looking forward to ever since I first saw artwork for it when it was announced what feels like an eternity ago. So for me, Ninja Theory's work is right up my alley. Enslaved was one of my favourite PS3 games the year it released. I loved Heavenly Sword, and I was one of the few people that didn't send death threats over Dante's hair colour in DMC, a game which I really liked the developer's take on the series. So Hellblade has been on my radar a long time, and I think it delivers on what Ninja Theory set out to do. So I'm going to get into my full review in this video, but before I do, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're so inclined. It really does help me out. So let's get into it.
Their gods can see into your mind. They will use this power to destroy you.
They won't stop me. I can still feel it.
Whatever's left of him, they will never let him go.
I'm not gonna let him rot here.
You're the one rotting here.
Leave me alone.
You will die here.
No.
And all your suffering will have been for nothing.
Shut up!
So I think Hellblade sets out its stall almost immediately as it opens with a kind of warning screen. The game has been developed in conjunction with physicians and mental health patients, and its goal is to depict the symptoms of psychosis, a kind of mental health disorder that causes hallucinations and delusions within its victims. And I mean, that makes Hellblade a challenging and honestly stressful game to play, but I think Ninja Theory should be applauded for tackling all of this in the right way. The game really leverages the unique attributes of video games to help you to empathise with the protagonist's plight, and in doing so I think it's going to really help raise awareness to real world issues, which is super important. So the game sees you play as Senua, who's a Celtic warrior from north of the English border. Upon witnessing the mutilation of her lover at the hands of the invading Vikings, she kind of plunges into insanity and is cast into a nearby forest by her family. It's here that she's able to live out her delusions, and so the game sees you taking a journey into the underworld, which is sort of an alternate reality that exists within Senua's mind. Are you keeping up? So as you can imagine, this makes for a quite harrowing experience. The story is quite garbled, but I think that's intentional because it's all part of the character's psychosis. You have to be paying attention to figure out what's going on, but I quite like plots that are a little open to interpretation and require critical thought, and I think that's what's good here. I'd argue that it maybe gets a little pretentious in places, but overall I think it achieves exactly what it wants to do. I think one of the highlights here is how it uses gameplay to convey the whole mental health thing. So for example, the camera is brought in uncharacteristically close for the character action genre. I know the new God of War is doing this too, but usually the genre pulls the camera back so that you have a full view of your surroundings. But in Hellblade, it's really close, and I think that's intentional. I think the game wants you to feel claustrophobic. And in combat, the game often spawns enemies behind you, but because you don't have a full view of everything that's going on, that's actually really stressful. Battles are all about positioning and enemy management, and I really like that aspect. The game also uses the voices that Senua hears in an interesting way. So when an enemy creeps up behind you, the voices will alert you to that, but they're not always reliable, so this creates for quite an interesting dynamic, I think. The sound design is absolutely excellent, and it's all been recorded using binaural microphones, so the positional data is captured as well, and if you're using good headphones, it can feel like there are people in the room with you. And as you may imagine, all of this creates for quite a stressful game to play, but that's ultimately the whole point, I think. There's one puzzle where you practically can't see and you need to navigate your way through a labyrinth filled with enemies just by listening to their sounds, which is absolutely amazing. And there's another bit where you're stalked while in the dark, and again, it's really tense, edge of your seat stuff. But not all of the representations of psychosis work. People with the disease will often say that they find new meaning in everyday objects, and the game represents that with puzzles where you need to find runes in the world by looking at it from a different perspective. These puzzles are fine, but they're recycled far too many times, and I found them to be a bit pace-sapping if I'm honest. I also think that the combat in this game, there's no HUD or UI or anything like that, so you rely on cuts that you inflict on enemies to determine their health. And I think it's a good combat system with parries and dodging and this neat slowdown mechanic, but it doesn't go much further than that. So while it does introduce different enemy types that you'll need to change your approach in order to deal with, it's not the deepest combat system in the world, and character action fans expecting something along those lines may be a bit disappointed with that. But look, if I'm honest with you, that's not really the point of the game.
Broken and lost. Just like your soul.
Come on. There.
One thing that can't be criticised are the visuals, which in my opinion rival the photorealism of the Order 1886, which is a mental achievement when you consider that the game's been developed on a pseudo-indie budget. The facial capture tech, as it delights in demonstrating frequently, is phenomenal, and I think the performances are really good across the board too, though I think the use of FMV is a bit out of place personally. So the game took me about 6 hours to complete, which is honestly longer than I expected. There are runes that you can find which may convince you to do a second playthrough if you fancy it, and there's also a documentary about the psychosis aspect of the game that you can watch upon completing it. I think given the price, it's well worth it. So ultimately, I really like this game. As I've mentioned throughout the review, it's a stressful and tense experience, but that's pretty much the point, and I respect Ninja Theory for being brave enough to make something like that. I've always said that gaming as a medium kinda under-delivers in my opinion, because it can make you feel a connection to the characters or the game world in a way that movies and books can't, and I think that Hellblade is a rare example of gameplay being used to almost raise awareness, I guess. I feel like I came away from this game understanding mental health that tiny bit better, and while it's obviously only scratching the surface of what is a very complex disease, I think that's important. So hats off to Ninja Theory. I really do think that this is a game worth experiencing, though it's obviously not going to be for everyone. But let me know whether you're going to try it in the comments section, and remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're so inclined. And until next time, thank you so much for watching.